Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today right here on Progressive Radio Network. And we bring you the Natural Nurse and Dr. Z on PRN.FM. We're so happy to be part of this network who continues to bring you cutting edge information throughout this time of challenge that we are all sharing at this point. Now, I have a guest on today. Her name is Dr. Anita Sanchez. But before we bring her on, I want to tell you about all the great things that we're doing at the Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. If you go to Natural Nurse, all one word, naturalnurse.com. And if you look at calendar, you'll see that we have so many online classes that continue. We've always been having online classes. And coming up, we have one on Hildegard de Bingen. Hildegard was a nurse. She was a nun, and she was a master herbalist, as well as being a women's rights advocate, and I mean in the year 1000. So she is an ancient healer, and yet she took the time to write down her remedies, which involved such things as energy medicine, prayer, how to use gemstones clinically, how to use herbs in very, very specific proportions. And what's so amazing, which is true about many of the other natural healing modalities that we talk about all the time, is that we can use those things today, and although we know as traditional healers that they've always worked, we now are able to look into them as a modality that can be studied. And when we study these ancient techniques, not only do we find out that, yes, in fact, they do work, but we also find out that we can discover how they work, the mechanism of action. So we have that class coming up, which you're definitely able to tune into. And we also have another class coming up about herbs, and that's about how to use herbs for yourself and your family. And you can join that class just as a class by itself, or you can join it for the full series and get a certificate, the Natural Nurse Herbal Certification. And if you are a professional, such as an RN or an NP or an RD, so registered dietitian, nurse practitioner, or a nurse, a massage therapist, an acupuncturist, any kind of professional license, you then get 18 CE credits for having taken the Natural Nurse Herbal Certification course. So anyone can take it. It's open to anyone, but if you need those credits, it's open for you too. And today we're going to have Anita Sanchez. Anita, I just want to shout out to you that we don't use video. So if you want to just, shut your camera off, that's good. So we do an audio show. And I also know I got an absolutely beautiful link to fantastic music that you did. So I'm just wondering if the PRN people got the music. I have to tell them it's a link on the show description that I sent. So we might be able to play that later if they're able to bring that up. We're all working under different circumstances in these days. But I'd like to bring you on board. Our guest today is Dr. Anita Sanchez, and she's going to share with us the 4 basic elements of healing that can be used in any situation by listening and having supportive relationships, unconditional love, and committing to change and positive action, which is certainly an uplifting part. So if they find it, we'll play it later in terms of your beautiful music.
Thank you.
So let's go back in time, Dr. Sanchez, and you are a Mexican American and Aztec in terms of genealogy, and you do transformational leadership as a consultant, speaker, coach, and author of a beautiful new book for sacred gifts. You also hold a PhD in organizational development from the University of Colorado. And you also bridge indigenous teachings with the latest science, which is just what I described, going way back in time to actually Hildegard, who was in the 1st century. Amazing. And we see that in so many, in several of the books I've written, such as The Natural Medicine Chest, where I document my 50 years of traveling around the world and living with indigenous healers. And just what you say is so true, that there's definite science behind what they do, even though they did not need the science to use it and see how it works. Now, through science, we're understanding why it works. And I love the way you inspire people to enjoy meaningful, empowered life and careers. So we have lots of time to discuss things today, Dr. Anita. So I'd like to go back and talk more about you. Tell us where you grew up and what inspired you as a child to become, a leader and to get a PhD and to be a leader in the transformational leadership arena.
Well, thank you. Yes, I grew up in Missouri, and on one hand, I had this gorgeous childhood in that I had my grandmother, who's Aztecan elder, my mother, the Osage people who would visit. So I was learning lots about some of the first scientists, I call them, about who we are, what we are, and not excluding anything. That is looking at how we are, who we are, from spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical level. And so I love that. And dream was one of the things that we would use because dream has a healing impact. As we know, modern science actually supports what indigenous people knew. But at the same time, I also had a tough side of my life, which was a childhood a secret about the abuse that was happening to me, as well as at 13, the racial murder of my father. So I say all that not to go down all of that, but to say that even in darkest circumstances, there is such power and light, medicinal things, people as well as plants and water and things here to support us to have a good life. So I wanted, in answering your question, finally with the piece of very early on, as early as age 3 and 4, I would have this recurring dream, and I still have this dream. So we all know we have dreams that are long-term and some that are short, some leave, some new ones, but this has been a long-term one. And it was a dream that I'd have of the earth. And there were all these, and they were different colors and sizes. And what was interesting in the dream is that they had their hands on each other's hearts. And so when I went to kindergarten, when they asked all of us what we're going to be when we grow up, people said mommies, daddies, nurses, wonderful things, doctors, firemen, all the wonderful things. And I drew this picture and said, I'm one of them. And there are millions of us all over connecting each other's hearts. And so I truly believe that dream that has continued, that as early as 16 when I started school, after my father's death, all of us moved as quickly as we can because of financial constraints. So I started college very early to get on with it. And actually that dream just spurred me on. I was the first in my family of 120 first cousins to have a PhD, to have a master's. And I feel that I'm glad it's inspired my relatives. But I also feel like I had this pool, this vision that helped me to do exactly follow through on what was my purpose in life in this journey.
People who find that And I have to say I'm one of them as well. I'm so fortunate because you see a vision and you're able to work towards it. But it certainly wasn't easy because so many people in your exact experience, Dr. Anita, really stay very stuck and
Mhm.
have, various kinds of addictions and problems, and they really don't necessarily, they're not always able to elevate themselves up out of that situation. How do you think that happened for you so you can share that with others?
Yes, I think it was a number of components. One, I had very strong women in my family. So my grandmother, my mom, all of the, and I looking back, none of the women drank. There was no use of drugs. So they were always sober and very much involved in the medicine, the plants, connecting to nature. And so that, and as well as my time spent in nature, even though I was in the inner city of Kansas City, I would every moment be able to go outside and sit next to a park or to museums to see beautiful things. Um, so that helped a great deal. And then also there are wonderful elders and people who in your life show up like teachers, librarians. I can count as a small child the number of people that I realize were seeing something in me that during the darkest times I wasn't able to see myself. And so I believe that there was a reason, a purpose. But you're right, what you said. Some people have a difficult time moving out. And in fact, in my teens, when I'd go to therapists, uh, some of them would say, I'd have to counsel them because they would say, "Oh my gosh, your experiences, you should be dead." And I said, "Please don't ever say that to anyone, because instead say, wow, you really have a purpose. You really are meant to be here. What it is that you're going to contribute." And that's what we need to be mirroring to each other because all of us are needed.
That's a beautiful story. Isn't it true that saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear? So you still have to do that work in terms of taking yourself out of, let's say, a feeling of helplessness, start to work towards a goal, and then it is magical how stepping stones will appear for you to step in on your path.
Absolutely, absolutely, and the prophecies, different ways of indigenous people from various traditions, as you know from traveling, share the wisdom from the past, present, and right into the future. And so the Eagle Hoop prophecy was one of these prophecies that where the four gifts that you spoke of earlier in my book, that the four gifts came forward. And so in the 90s, when I was beginning to lose hope that I could actually, in large corporations, help women move up into higher levels of leadership, or men of color, or even a white man who just didn't fit the regular profile of who sits at the top of organizations. And these gifts showed up. As you said, the universe is really working on our behalf. And in doing my volunteer work, this Eagle Hoop showed up, and the four gifts put in it that were put in it by the 27 elders from indigenous tribes around the world. And those just, it was perfect timing. Is when I was going to change. I already had my doctorate, so I could do something else. But instead, it was like, oh my gosh, no, this is what I had forgotten. I just need to remember. And if I use these four gifts, the promise was that you will remember how to be in healthy relationship with yourself, other people, the earth, and spirit itself. And I began using them then in 95 and continue to use them today, weaving that and other indigenous wisdom into the work that I do with executives, their teams, throughout various organizations and nonprofit organizations around the world.
Well, that's very interesting to me. Um, and we're talking today with our guest, Dr. Anita Sanchez. And a very good website to find her at is forsacredgifts.com. That's the word for spelled out, FOUR, sacred gifts with an S, gifts.com, because that is also the name of her book, which is absolutely beautiful. Now, it's interesting and rather unfortunate, Dr. Anita, that in our current time at this moment, dealing with the crisis and so many of us are locked at home, that unfortunately communities that are indigenous communities and Native American in particular in the United States are suffering great ravages of this virus.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You know, this virus, this bug, I hear over and over again in reading and listening that it doesn't discriminate, that it attacks all of us. However, that is true. And the most vulnerable we are seeing as they're pulling out the statistics are getting hit harder. So we see that African Americans, almost twice than their population, are coming up with the COVID-19 virus and dying from it. And for Native American people, the same is true in that, especially because systems and structures that have been in place, that means limiting our access economically to health services and other things has resulted in us being more vulnerable. So yes, it does have, this bug is attacking all of us and has us all on the same narrative. At the same time, again, I think it's being opening our hearts and our minds and really listening to see what is being told to us, what is it we can learn so that we can make this a thriving place for all human beings. In fact, for the earth itself, that of course supports our health and well-being.
Yes, that is true. And so many things in nature do. That's what my whole life path has been about. But also in terms of self-care responsibility, you
Mm-hmm.
know, when they're talking about people who seem to do the worst are those with underlying conditions. Many of those underlying conditions are actually self-induced. It
Mm-hmm.
has to do with things like what you put in your mouth. So
Yes.
perhaps this will build an awareness of that. Do you work out? Do you keep your body in shape? As well as the psycho-emotional spiritual connection that is also so important.
I so agree with you. And that's what makes me very excited about so many places are food deserts of the poorest poor, which many of the Native American reservations are. Uh, however, and urban Indians where they live. However, what was happening even before this virus, we were seeing the onslaught of more and more gardens, community gardens being grown, so we could access to real food, you know, green vegetables, fruits, and then, of course, always, you know, fish and lean meats are wonderful. And so that hopefully resurgence of that was before will only just explode and expand as we get through this most necessary social distancing so that we're in solidarity with all of life. That's why we're doing this.
That's a beautiful observation, Dr. Anita, because that's so true. If everything works towards the best, and let's hope it does, and of
Mhm.
course, those of us can take action and make it, it's such an excellent example of why growing food in the neighborhood is the way to go rather than more and more commercial agriculture. Really, it's such an easy thing because very small plots of land can grow a lot of food in every single neighborhood. And I really think that's how it should be done. My own son, Titus Comet Kahutek, who's a very interesting person, he put vegetables in his front yard in Seattle. And
Mm.
some people came by and said to him, aren't you afraid that someone will steal the vegetables you grew? He said, oh, I'll fix that. And he went in the back in his shed and he made a big sign that says, take whatever you want. And he brought it back out and put the steak and by the vegetables. He said, that's it, no stealing.
Oh, I love your son. That's the kind of gift economy that I think, as you said, hope and some action that will really come out of this because we're all given the time now to really reflect, to use it, to see what really is meaningful, what really matters. All the needless consumption and hoarding, whether it's hoarding of your own foodstuffs or hoarding of wealth or other things like what are we doing? So I think this is a powerful thing, and your son is a wonderful example of how to
I have to say, of
healthy
course,
choices.
I agree. And you know what happens because of that? Then his neighbors came and they started taking some of his vegetables, but then they said, you know what, let's have a meeting on the block. This is just a regular block, it's not
Mhm.
farmland. And I'll grow this and you grow that, and then everybody now walks around every night and takes whatever from everybody's yard, and there's more than enough for everybody. And then
Yeah,
they gather it and take it to food banks. So that's what happens just from
yeah.
one person taking positive action.
Well, you're giving a perfect example of one of the four gifts, which is unity. It's amazing and not amazing at all what happens when human beings, when we get into really understanding our interconnectedness and how individually we can be, just amazing and do incredible things. But together, we're just this exploding, expanding genius so that you could really care for each other. And in that process of sharing food and that, there's much more that's also happening at the spiritual, emotional, and mental level that, of course, is feeding us as well as that food, that nourishing food is feeding our bodies.
Well, this is so wonderful that you were able actually get a PhD, which you kind of threw out there like, oh, that was nothing. I just got my PhD. And then I went on to my real work. But there had to be a movement there from you growing up, with various challenges
Yeah,
and even
yeah,
abuse and moving forward. I mean, that is a major
yes. One of
accomplishment.
it is, and one of the big inspirations of my life was my mother. My mother, because her mom had 10 children and she was the second, got very ill. And so, so very early, my mom only made it to seventh grade. And the rest of the time, she raised her brothers and sisters while my grandmother recovered. And however, my mom, I pit her against any PhD playing Scrabble. She read the dictionary when we couldn't get out to the library because the weather would be so bad. She would have us sit and read the dictionary. This woman always, when she wasn't working, which was a lot of the time, she would have a book. And I loved that. And I loved mimicking my mom, who I just thought was one of the most amazing people. And so that love of learning, of understanding and traveling, because we had no money, we were quite economically poor. But you could travel by reading books, by going to the museums, and we would go to the museum every week when it was open for free. So there are always ways when the heart desires, and I think that's it. Is sometimes it's we have to shift our mindset. But one of the ways to do that is to come through the heart. And I would say my mom was one of the most amazing heart-based leaders and teachers there ever was.
Yeah, that's such an excellent example. Instead of her sitting there going, oh, we don't have any money, we're economically disadvantaged, so therefore we just have to, drink alcohol all day and not do anything. Instead, she said, oh, there are museums that are open for free. Let's go there. So it really has to do a lot with self determination and not taking on victimhood
Yes,
as
and
well.
so part of that not taking on victimhood is what I found, Ellen, is that there's a role for forgiveness because we know all of us have had hurts and mistreatments to all of us. And some of us as collective groups have had huge ones. Native, indigenous people all over the world, extinction was the goal of many governments, many settlers as they came in. And yet we're still here. So we need to make choices. We all have to make choices. Every moment is a choice. And part of what helps us to make healthy choices is to use the gift of forgiveness. Because when we forgive and not hold on to some burden, some horrific hurt or mistreatment didn't happen or did happen, and all of that kind of stuff, and just spiral down there. When we let that go because we love ourselves, because we want to be present in the moment, we release that energy and we can use it in the now. So I think that was part of what happened for me in being able to forgive my abuser and also to forgive the man who murdered my father and his family. I realized that what happens at the hurt is the illusion is that you become stuck in time. You become so over identified with the pain, you forget all the beauty and joy and sacredness of who we all are. So the gift of forgiveness, the power to forgive the unforgivable, is one of those things that all of us can use. Because when we look back in time, you think, I see your pictures, so I make up the story, and I could be wrong, that you're European American. Oh my gosh, look at what happened to so many European Americans. Europeans back there, their ancestors, it wasn't all lovely. There were horrible things that happened to people. And so we have to release. And now we know through medical, what the elders had told us for some times, through different song and dance and plant medicine, to release the old, that now we know through science that we have stored in our own DNA and our own the hurts and mistreatments from the past. So this is also such a good time when everything is slowed down to really listen to ourselves and to listen what is coming up, what is telling us that's hurt or pain or not quite right, and not run from it, but rather go towards it. That is our own sacredness, our own bodies, spirits, and minds telling us, and hearts, it's time. It's time to let go. It's time to heal.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And what we're going to do, Dr. Anita, is we're going to play some of your beautiful sacred music as we go to break and as we come back. And then we'll talk about how you design that as well and how people can find out more. And we'll continue our discussion with Dr. Anita Sanchez, our beautiful gift for today, our beautiful guest for today. We'll be right back with more right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z.
Standing in right relations, embracing the four directions. Forgiveness is a way to freedom. Separateness is illusion. I'm talking about sacred giving. Grandmother, indigenous wisdom.
On this edition of the Natural Medicine Chest, we'll take a look at the soybean, its phytochemistry, and its role as a food and medicine.
It is exciting to see a resurgence in research by universities and food scientists on the role that foods play in disease prevention. Many of these institutions, such as the United Soybean Board, the American Soybean Farmers Association, and the National Cancer Institute, are busy developing designer foods, or superfoods, concentrating the essential nutrients and phytochemicals in soybeans and other foods that have potent medicinal effects. Commonly known foods which have soy in them include soy milk, a cheese-like substance called tofu, tempeh, a fermented soy protein, and tamari, a fermented soy sauce. The soybean is a rich source of many nutrients, including selenium, zinc, beta-carotene, vitamins A, C, and E, and 20 of the 22 amino acids. Soy also contains essential fatty acids.
Research on soy foods is vast and well known to health enthusiasts, although the general public and physicians in the United States may not be aware of this plethora of research. In Japan and China, however, this is not the case, as a voluminous number of scientific studies have been carried out in animals and humans. Chinese studies reveal that soy products can increase the ability, rate of activity, and number of white blood cells. Patients receiving chemotherapy and radiation can benefit from drinking soy milk, which in several studies demonstrated a protective effect on the liver and gastrointestinal system.
It is interesting to note that the British journal Lancet revealed that vegetarians and Asians who ingest high amounts of soy have the lowest rates of cancer. This is due to one of soy's constituents called genistein. This chemical is a phytoestrogen, or plant estrogen, which can decrease and block the uptake of human estrogen and testosterone. as well as enhance its excretion. Like the drug tamoxifen, it competes with estrogen for uptake in the reproductive tissues. By doing so, hormone-dependent cancers like ovarian, breast, and prostate cancers may be prevented.
In conditions where there is a deficiency of hormones, such as osteoporosis and menopause, soy isoflavones, such as genistein, can weakly mimic estrogen and reduce the severity of these problems.
So, listeners, don't count out the versatile soybean. Make it a delicious and nutritious part of your natural medicine chest.
Sacred giving, we protect the wisdom tradition. You know you can't hold us back. We stand for truth and right relation. We are healing from the inside out, from the inside out.
And welcome back once again to The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. And just a caveat about that soy information that we just shared, please be sure it's organic soy, because any soy that is grown right now is sprayed with glyphosate, which is a severe carcinogen. However, if you choose organic soy, you're less likely to get inundated with that glyphosate. So that's unfortunately something you have to keep in mind. Now, today we're having a beautiful guest on our show. Her name is Dr. Anita Sanchez. We're talking about the reemergence of belonging. That's a pretty interesting topic, the reemergence of belonging. Wow, how appropriate for our time. And you can find Dr. Sanchez at FourSacredGifts.com. That's FOUR. And so thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Sanchez.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful conversation with you.
That music was absolutely beautiful. Tell us about the history of how you produced it and where people could find that if they'd like that inspiring music for themselves.
Yes, the song is called In Right Relations. So you can get it for free. You can go download it at FourSacredGifts.com. If you prefer, you can buy it for 99 cents at both Spotify, iTunes, all the different channels have it. But how it was inspired was actually, again, it's a gift. So I wrote the book, and I happened to meet these two young men when I was at a meeting. And they began talking to me, and they said, well, you know, your book sounds really important. It should have a song. And I said, well, that's wonderful, but publishers don't create songs for books. They said, no, we're the brothers Koren, Koren, and we would like to gift it to you. You just need to sit with us and tell us what all the messages are. We've already gotten a lot from what you've said. So this song is based on the messages in my book. It's based on the messages from close to 50 indigenous leaders, elders from different traditions all over the world. And the singers themselves, some of them are professional. I'm the chanter at the beginning, and I'm not a professional singer. And but there are various, 3/4 of the group are indigenous, various tribes, Algonquin and others. And then the Koren brothers themselves, the brothers Koren are Australian who live here in California. And so it is a beautiful song. And so when people buy my book, they also get on there, it tells them where to go and download the song. But your viewers, your listeners, please, this song, what we know from music, that indigenous people knew all over the world, that dancing, music, sound has a powerful healing effect, has the ability to open the heart and mind to amazing creativity and healthy relationships. And this song, as it gets played in different places around the world, I get little notes from people and they're just like, oh my gosh, I just turned that on and all of a sudden things shift in me. And that's the power of beautiful, powerful, good intention, reminding us who and what we really are.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Anita. Now, you got your PhD in organizational development from the University of Colorado. I had another colleague at the University of Colorado who was a scientist and actually working a lot on the medicinal components in herbs. So a lot of great things are going on there at the University of Colorado. Now, from being a specialist and highly trained with a PhD in organizational development, and now seeing as right now, as we speak, basically all of society is ripped apart, wouldn't that be a great time to initiate, as we regroup, some of these organizational changes that could lead to more equity, more kindness, more food, with things like that? Wouldn't this be a really good time to have people like you on board to restructure?
Yes, I totally agree with you that this virus, I know I read and hear some people saying, oh, this is a punishment for who we are and what we've done, and everything. I, I and other elders, as we talk, this is not a punishment. This is an opportunity for a realignment. And I think that's what you're suggesting is that all the systems and structures, the ways of us doing our business and relating to each other and things, this is an opportunity now to see what could be shifted, what might be different, to do some dreaming and then play back in actual behavior and actions. What do we need to do in these restructurings to have more of these community gardens, to have more equity within organizations of how we work, and maybe some of the hierarchical and the separating that we do. We're getting to understand big time right now that our illusion of separateness is exactly that, an illusion. Every thought, every deed, it all has impact, whether it's halfway around the world or sitting right next to the desk right next to you within 6 feet away. And so having that knowledge, I'm hoping that, and I'm already in action, this interview with you is one of those, as we get to, and thank you so much for what you do, you get to spread these ideas, this remembering of people who want to be in health and with themselves and with each other and the earth itself. So this is an amazing time to be alive. And yes, I do not want to play down the suffering, the deaths. Each one of those people are families, and it's very difficult suffering. So I don't want to transcend that. At the same time, what we're asking of leaders, I think, is to be able to see the reality of what is, but also what is possible, to be the vision keepers. And what are the actions that we can do that are life-giving to move us forward in an alignment that will mean really thriving for all of us all over the world and for our earth itself?
Well, we certainly can hope it leads in that direction, as well as do everything we personally can to make that happen.
Yeah.
So, in terms of your book, The Four Sacred Gifts, Indigenous Wisdom for Modern Times, and it couldn't be more appropriate than it is right now. What are those four sacred gifts, just in a row?
Yes. The first gift is the power to forgive the unforgivable. The second gift is the power of unity. Unity will take all of us to create a thriving world. The third gift is the beautiful gift of the power of healing. And the fourth gift is the power of hope in action. Use these four gifts and you will remember how to be, as the song said, in right relationship with yourself, other people, nature, the earth itself.
So how do people who are struggling, let's say, with addiction, change their focus from really, because when you're struggling with an addiction, that's very self-centered, right? It's about serving yourself in terms of that need or want. And it's not an easy thing to overcome.
It is not at all. So what happens, and we've seen this time and time again, addiction is a big one. And it has to deal with, at some point, the person who is addicted has to make the choice as well. But this is where one of the elements of healing, which is supportive relationships. So we also hear when someone is addicted that family members will come together with a professional and make an intervention to help the person see. Sometimes in that serious intervention, they realize what is going on, and sometimes they still fight it. So what's really critical with an addiction or any kind of hurt or mistreatment that exists that you're having difficulty letting go of, that you literally are addicted to, you start to confuse it with your own self-image. That requires us to listen. It means really listening to yourself, first of all, and then listening to others. Because when the addicted person does get healed, they go, why didn't I do this sooner? I should have been listening to my body was breaking down. I was treating others just horribly, the people I love. Why wasn't I listening? And so listening is really a powerful, powerful tool that all of us have. And so that's one of the things. And then the second element, of course, is supportive relationships. As I said, when I was young and went to college at 16, I always held that secret about my abuse. But when I saw other people, professors, brilliant people, even the president of the university, I ended up being student body president, running for that and getting elected. They saw leadership and things in me that I didn't see. And having supportive relationships, other people, health providers, and even all of us can be good medicine to each other. Seeing that began to drop down and split apart that illusion that I was not a sacred being, that I was not worth it, all those things. And that discrepancy began to help me listen to what was really those dreams that I had, the what as I meant to be and do in the world. And that's why it makes it sound like, oh, I just went off and did my doctorate. No, it was a lot of years getting through my bachelor's, master's, and my PhD, because I worked full time during my PhD. But I knew that this was a call. I could hear inside my heart, my mind, I supported my heart in that, Anita, you are meant to do your role in this beautiful hoop of life, and you should not waste it. And I think the addicted person, because of the power of whatever the chemical or hurt or mistreatment that they're hooked to, it will require listening, supportive relationships, hopefully moving to the place which I found in studying healing all over the world, unconditional love. Yes, that four-letter word plays a big role. And then it takes positive action. It doesn't mean just sitting back and waiting something to happen to you. You have hope in action. You know, it is an energy source, but it pulls you into positive action.
And there is some self-responsibility of people, deciding that they need to initiate change about something.
Absolutely.
And that's a big step. Well, we're going to take another little break right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. And you can always find us at naturalnurse.com. Please visit the website. Go to calendar if you'd like to join in with any of the up and coming and ongoing classes. Interesting, like most of them are already online, and then we have several on ground. Don't know about those. Those are being canceled as we move forward, but maybe some in June or July when we're out gathering edible and medicinal plants and making them into medicine. We'll be back on ground, and if not, we'll do that virtually as well. We will be right back with more right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z.
Endangered on the brink of extinction. See the youth run from separation. Hope is the choice that we're making as we change the world with intention. We are dreaming reconciliation. Dignity for all is our vision. Let us run.
Stay up to date with PRN for the latest on COVID-19, the coronavirus, on prn.fm, the Progressive Radio Network.
Hey folks, my name is Jordan Valerie, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm here to tell you about the Millennial Politics Podcast. We speak with the next generation of progressive candidates, activists, and organizations dedicated to restoring our democracy and protecting our civil rights and liberties. Make sure to stay tuned for Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Progressive Radio Network, to hear the most recent episode of our podcast, and follow us on social media and iTunes to stay up to date with everything millennial politics.
Love, lust, and laughter. Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm your host, Dr. Diana Wiley, a board-certified sex therapist and a marriage and family therapist. Guests, colleagues, authors are interviewed, and we sometimes dispense advice to create a format that is both informative and entertaining. If you can't listen live, go to the archives and even rate the show on iTunes. The Progressive Radio Network is moving forward, and we hope that you are coming with us.
Hi, I'm David Crow, host of The Infectious Myths, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time here on PRN.FM. I love science the way it should be practiced, but a lot of modern science is corrupted by financial interests and serves a master other than the public good. Myths continue to be constructed around viruses, vaccines, forensics, and pharmaceutical drugs. People are dying and ending up in jail because of them. Listen to me as I deconstruct the myths that those who call themselves scientists weave, or when I wander into social and political topics. If you're new to the show, check out our past episodes at infectiousmyth.podbean.com.
Not the right thing, only the real thing. PRN.FM.
We're indivisible when we shine. You know you can't hold us back. We stand for truth and right relation. We are healing from the inside out, from the inside.
And welcome back to more right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. That beautiful music you've been hearing as we go in and out of break is also called Four Sacred Gifts, and it is on the website at foursacredgifts.com. Wonderful thing to download for your own health and healing and inspiration. And it is a creation of our guest today, Dr. Anita Sanchez. And she did explain to us the story about how it was designed and developed after the writing of her wonderful book, Four Sacred Gifts. And you can find that also at foursacredgifts.com. In addition, Dr. Anita, welcome back to The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z.
Thank you. I'm having a wonderful time in conversation with you.
Now, you have such beautiful words that are so appropriate for right this moment within that song. Hope is the choice that we are making. That is so important. Rather than being, even in this moment, everybody, no matter where you started out, your path to this lock-in situation, make a choice about what the future is going to be and do some work towards it. Dignity, reconciliation, right relations, beautiful words within that song, Dr. Anita. And was that with your husband? Did I read that you made that?
No, it's with the brothers Corin, who I made that. But these are all messages that came from elders all over the world that were part of my creation of the book. And so I just wanted to find another way. And these two singers, musicians, the brothers Corin, met me and gifted that. They said, this is important, the messages here, just as you're saying. And so it seems like, again, the universe is at work on our behalf when we choose to be present and give our gifts, is that this book and the messages is just at the right time for all of us, wherever we are around the world, to use, to own our power. We are not powerless, even in this process. Instead, what it is we get to make the choice of how to respond to this situation that all over the world we're in. And so you and I have been talking about well, that response, we're hopeful, and we're doing our part of the action to see that it's one that's going to make us even more life-giving and more mindful about how we treat our bodies, how we treat each other, how we treat the earth, all the things that support life. Indeed, the things we create, the businesses, our families, these various communities should be life-giving as well. And I'm excited about what we can create out of this.
Well, you use the word indigenous when you're explaining your work.
Yes.
And recently in time, because I've been doing this over 50 years, I started writing books and doing this work in 1964. That's with a 6. That's actually when I became a medicinal herbalist. So I've been doing it a very long time. But more recently, there's a concept of using indigenous knowledge, but that it's incorrect for anyone to share that unless they are of that tribal path.
You're bringing up a difficult question and an important one. So there is appropriation, I think, is what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yes, and so indigenous people, because of the whole history and pain and mistreatment, things were just taken. Disease actually were passed on that didn't know how to deal with, and so whole tribes were wiped out. So that's the part of the issue. However, at this time, indigenous people have given a gift to all of us. We know this from the United Nations reports on the state of our biodiversity and many, many other kind of scientific reports, is that currently 80% of the most biodiverse lands left on this planet, on this earth, are places that indigenous people are on. And why they are still in a healthy relationship is because indigenous wisdom has said how to be in healthy relationship with the plants, with the earth, to not overconsume, to how to plant, to not use lethal chemicals and all those kinds of things. And so in those reports from the United Nations, it is essential to have indigenous guidance and leadership in how we're going to make a viable world for the recent future and foreseeable future. So I'm also seeing important, Ellen, is that more and more indigenous people, those who have stayed connected with the original wisdom, are clearly understand that all people are indigenous. We are all from the earth, from those elements, from the stars. Science tells us that, but even in our hoop of life, in our teachings all over the world, we knew that we know and have been taught we are all connected, all my relations. So whether or not you remember, you are part of my relations.
And that is a beautiful thought, because and maybe we'll help to save some parts of the earth that are so quickly being decimated.
Yes, and not only, yes, decimated. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I needed to do a better job of listening there. But what made me excited is, so even in the fires of the Amazon, what happened all over the world is people began to learn the importance of our primary forests. This isn't just over there. 20% of our oxygen comes from these primary forests. So if we destroy them, we are destroying not only the lungs of Mother Earth, we are destroying our own lungs. And in this COVID-19, we're starting to see places. I live outside on the foothills outside of Denver. I have not been able to see and count the buildings in downtown Denver for years. Every day I can count, unless it's snowing hard, I can count the buildings. China, same thing. People can actually open their windows. Cities, New York City, my friends I talk to, incredible, and seeing the water being clean. So it doesn't mean we have to come to a total halt, but it does mean that we need to understand that we are intimately connected with each other and with the earth. And our wisdom, all of our wisdom is needed at this time, and to share that. And that's part of what is happening with many indigenous people all over the world, are sharing with others of what we know works and how to keep the planet a life-giving one for all of us today, as well as for at least 7 generations out and further, for all of our children, our children's children, and other species' children. It is so critical.
Yes, and so often societies actually have rules such as Chief Seattle in our own Northwest shared about considering how any action taken by a leader will affect the seventh generation from where they are now, instead of just the bottom line for the next quarter.
If you could see me, Ellen, and your listeners, I'm smiling from ear to ear to hear wonderful leader. And yes, this is the kind of wisdom that exists, that's carried on from those elders who've passed, like Chief Seattle, but also the new elders, young people. Elder does not mean just old in age. Elder can be the young people who are coming in with such wisdom that we need to pay attention. And we know when we listen with the softest part of our ears and an expanding heart, we know it to be true and to help us guide us in the proper direction of how to be a life-giving person on this earth.
Well, thank you so much for that, Dr. Anita. We're coming to the end of our time together with Dr. Anita Sanchez. Can you tell us one more little pearl of wisdom and how people can find out more about you and get a copy of that beautiful music that we've been playing as we come in and out of breaks here?
Yes. So what I'd like to say is that we are all practicing social distancing, but that does not mean isolation or separation. In fact, we're seeing all the different ways that we're connecting with each other through our solidarity of keeping those 6 feet apart to make each other healthy, to keep each other's healthy. So thank you for that. And you can find my song, In Right Relations, by going to four-sacredgifts.com. That's F-O-U-R, sacredgifts.com. You can download it for free. And if you don't wish to go to that site, you can just go to, I know some people love Spotify, iTunes, the other In Right Relations, Anita Sanchez. You'll be able to find that song and you can get it that way as well. But I just want to also say to everyone, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for especially listening to this program of Ellen's Natural Nurse, because the healing, what I've heard in other episodes, it's so important for us at this time. Every one of us matters. We are not our circumstances. We are so much more. And the hoop of life needs you.
Well, thank you so much. And from one grandmother to another, I hope we actually get to hug in person at some point. So as we move forward into today, I want to wish all our listeners the best of health and happiness for yourself and your relations. And until next time, this is Ellen Kamai, the Natural Nurse, on behalf of myself and my partner, Dr. Eugene Zamperone. We do this show together. We're hoping that you stay healthy.
From the inside out.
Let the tears become a river. Let the river go to sea. Let the waves carry us to shore. Let me all just run free. Let me all